Good morning. Welcome in Maastricht. My name is Tom van Veen. I act as pro-rector of this university. And hereby I open this academic ceremony in which Marten Laudi will defend the academic thesis Sustainable Investment Preferences and How They Are Delegated. May I invite you, Marten, to present a summary of your study and the conclusions of your thesis. You have 15 minutes for that.
Dear Pro-Rector, dear members of the Corona, dear friends, family and colleagues, thanks a lot for being here for my defense ceremony. So for the next 15 minutes, I will try to summarize what I've been doing for the last 5 years using non-technical language. So some years ago, the European Commission published an action plan to promote sustainable finance. And there was an interesting quote in that action plan, which was that the financial sector has a key role to play in reaching the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And as such, the action plan included proposals for policy to redirect money towards investments that have a sustainable impact. So now you may be wondering, how can money that I invest have a sustainable impact? Well, think about your pension money. So the money that is deducted each month from your salary to go into your pension. And many pension funds in Germany and in the Netherlands have sustainable investment strategies. So we can think about our pension manager or our pension fund manager. And it could be that this pension fund manager uses a divestment strategy. So this person would use your money to buy and sell stocks. And this pension fund manager would screen the sustainability of the business activities of firms and then would not invest in firms whose business practices are not sustainable. Unfortunately, academic evidence shows that the actual sustainable impact of these divestment strategies is at best quite low and at worst even negative. But there's other strategies that our pension fund manager could follow. So for example, the pension fund manager could use an engagement strategy. So select particularly firms with non-sustainable business activities and then use his or her rights as a large shareholder to put forth shareholder proposals or to vote on proposals in order to make the business activities of this firm more sustainable. But irrespective of the precise strategy that our pension fund manager would use, he or she would concentrate on 3 aspects of sustainability, which form the 3 pillars of ESG. So we have the E, the environmental aspects. So for example, how much carbon is emitted by a particular company. Then we have the S, the social, so how does a firm treat people? So for example, how does a firm pay fair wages? And then we have the G, the governance, so does a firm comply with regulation? And for example, what measures does a firm have in place against corruption or bribery? And if you've never heard of ESG before, don't worry, because you're not alone. So I asked about 3,000 clients of a German bank the question, are you aware of the term ESG in the context of sustainable investing? And more than half of the people that I asked said, I have no idea what you're talking about, ESG means nothing to me. And then I asked a kind of broader question, which was, are you knowledgeable about sustainable financial investments? And here more than 40% gave me the lowest score, saying that they're not at all knowledgeable about sustainable investments. And this is precisely one of the issues that was identified by the European Commission, that people have a lack of knowledge, or investors have a lack of knowledge. And how can we expect them to select sustainable financial investment products if they do not even know that they exist? So what is the solution? So there's a new regulation which is already in place since August of last year and counts for all of the EU, which requires all financial institutions and insurance companies to ask any new client, do you have a preference for sustainability in your investments? And in the the guidelines for good practice, it is also outlined that a simple explanation should be given on what exactly this means. So when this regulation change was first announced, there was first of all quite some critique. First of all from investor protection authorities, but also from the media, which voiced concerns that maybe financial institutions take this knowledge about sustainability preferences as an excuse to charge higher fees to those who communicate the sustainability preferences. So to see whether I can find evidence for this, I recruited some professional financial advisors, first of all in the US and then in Europe. And I asked these financial advisors to select stocks on behalf of clients. And in line with the new regulation, these financial advisors asked all their clients, do you have a preference for sustainability in your investments? And then some clients would say yes, and some clients would say no. And then the financial advisors would select stocks for all of these clients and would set a fee for their service. And when I look at this fee, I see that it is significantly higher for those who said yes, so for the clients who communicated sustainability preferences relative to those who answered the question with no. And importantly, the advisors do not spend more time on these clients. They don't put in more effort for these clients, and it's also not more expensive for them to manage these sustainable investments. And therefore, these results are in line with the notion of price discrimination, where financial advisors charge different fees to different client groups while providing basically the same service. Interestingly, the advisors don't charge a higher fee to all sustainable clients, but within the client group that has low finance knowledge, the financial advisors charge a higher fee to the sustainable relative to the conventional clients, but not among the client group that has high finance knowledge. In chapter 2, I put the pricing implications aside and look at whether information that is communicated by a financial institution to its clients has an effect on sustainable investment behavior. So I worked together with a large German bank in Germany to distribute information to their clients. We give all clients or we select a group of clients that all clients know, by the way, that they are part of a study, and we give them some simple explanation of sustainable investments. And then we split the group, the clients into 4 groups, and the first group doesn't receive any information beyond that, but the 3 other groups in addition receive peer information. So that is information about related others, in this case other Germans. And this information about what others believe and do has been shown to affect what we do ourselves. So we tell the first group about 70% of Germans say that sustainable investments can have an impact. We tell the second group about 70% of Germans say that they intend to invest in sustainable investments in the future. And we tell the third group that about 70% of other Germans say that sustainable investments yield the same or higher returns. So all of this information is based on surveys, and we provide the sources to the clients so that they can verify the information that we give to them. And then we ask the clients to allocate 10,000 euros between a conventional fund and a sustainable fund. And we tell the clients that for one randomly selected participant of the study, we actually realize their investment decision, so we buy the funds according to their selection and pay them out the returns of the investment. So how did the clients make their allocations? We find that those in the peer information treatment groups allocate significantly more to the sustainable fund relative to those in the control group. However, we also look at the portfolio holdings after the experiment. So we monitor the portfolios of all the participants of our study in 3 months after our study to check whether the portfolios maybe become more sustainable. However, we don't see that the portfolios of participants increase in sustainability, neither among those who only received a simple explanation about sustainable investments, nor among those who in addition received the peer information. So it seems to be quite difficult to have a substantial impact with information communicated by a financial institution on sustainable investment behavior. In the third chapter, I look at whether investors react to news about the sustainability of firms, so on the firm level. So let me give you an example. So let's imagine a shareholder of Volkswagen, and one day this shareholder opens the newspaper and sees Volkswagen has cheated on emission scandals, and this firm is actually a lot less sustainable than we initially thought. And I checked how do investors react to these scandals. And what I find is that investors tend not to sell their stocks, so they just keep holding onto their stocks, even though their portfolio then becomes less sustainable. Interestingly, I do see that investors to some extent react to this information because they tend to spend dividends more quickly when they come from scandalous companies relative to when they come from firms with no scandal. Okay, so let me move to my takeaways that I have for you. So I have 3 takeaways. The first one, so the results of the first chapter of the dissertation suggest that those investors who submit sustainability preferences and cannot signal high financial literacy may have to pay higher fees. And this may kind of create a barrier for people to share their sustainability preferences with their financial advisors. And this may be an unintended side consequence of the new EU regulation. Second, the portfolios of the investors that I observe are relatively sticky. And also the sustainability of the portfolios doesn't change a lot over the horizon on which I look at them. And behavioral interventions and new information only have very limited effect on the sustainability of the portfolio. So it seems to be quite difficult to influence the sustainability of portfolios at the individual level. And taking together the results from my dissertation and taking into account the literature that I review in the dissertation lead me to my third takeaway, which is sort of a bold statement, which is that financial advice will not eliminate the disparity between household sustainability preferences and their manifestation in investment behavior. And with that, I would like to give the word back to the prorector.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. The opposition will be opened by Professor Bos, chair of the assessment committee. That's the committee that has assessed the quality of the thesis. And Professor Bos is professor of banking and finance at Maastricht University.
Thank you, Prorector. Dear candidates, so first, congratulations on writing a really nice and interesting thesis. I think it's a good evidence of what is the power of randomized control trials for inference in this setting. And you may have noticed also that in my comments on your thesis, there was hardly anything about those randomized control trials, and that's not because I didn't care, it's because I thought they were excellently executed. My question is in a way related to that. So the nice thing about an RCT is that if the randomization works, we have 2 groups that are very similar, and the only thing that differs between them is whether they are treated or not. In your chapter 4, in a sense, you're trying to do the same thing, I think, but then in a regression setting, because you use true value lab scores and you turn them into a dummy variable. And in my comments on your thesis, I commented already on why would you want to do that? You're throwing away information. Let me quote from a very well cited paper in BMJ, the biomedical journal, but I could have quoted another source as well, but I thought this one was nice because it mimics your reaction to my comment. Quote, "A common argument is that it greatly simplifies the statistical analysis and leads to easy interpretation and presentation of results," which is more or less exactly what you replied to me. In that same article, however, they also mentioned the costs of turning what is essentially a continuous presumably more or less normally distributed variable into a dichotomous dummy variable. And they mentioned 6 things. First, you lose a lot of information. Well, that was the point that I already made to you. But then there's a couple of other things. So second thing is, it's equivalent. So if you create a dummy at the median, it's equivalent to discarding 1/3 of your data set. Third, it increases the chances of having false positives. Fourth, it leads to an underestimation of the variation in outcome between groups, and possibly an overestimation of the variation in outcome within groups. Fifth, it makes you assume, and this comes back to the RCTs, that people who are very close to the cutoff are very different. In the way that you create a dummy variable, if somebody has a true value lab score slightly below or slightly above the cutoff, you treat them as completely different, whereas everybody, including true value labs, would say, no, they're actually very similar. And then sixth, it conceals nonlinearity. So I would say those are serious things to consider when you're turning a continuous variable into a dummy variable. In your answer to my question, you mentioned 2 reasons why, nevertheless, you choose to do so. So my questions are basically challenging you on your answers. So I have 2 very related questions. First, why is a model with a dummy variable easier to handle computationally than a model with a real non-binary variable? Because that's part of your answer, that it's easier to estimate in that way. I don't see that. Secondly, how is the output straightforward to interpret, given that you've replaced a true continuous variable with a dichotomous variable and increased the probability of a false positive? I look forward to your answers.
Highly esteemed opponents, first of all, thank you very much for the compliments and the kind words. And then thank you very much for your question. So when I think about how to best implement these true value labs scores as a continuous variable, so I would first of all think about in interaction terms. So first of all, we have let's think about my main table from that paper. So we have in the first column the level score. So where we, as you correctly say, use a binary classification. So those that are in the lowest 30th percentile in terms of true value lab scores are negatively perceived firms, and the others are positively perceived firms. Instead of sort of putting that dummy into this regression, we could use the true value labs score as a continuous variable. Oh, thank you. And for the remaining columns, I think, so to me, this seemed a bit more difficult. So there we look at, well, we classify negative and non-negative dividends in terms of changes. So we look at the largest 30th or the lowest 30th percentile in terms of the strongest changes in the true value labs score over time. So there we could include the change over the last week, let's say, as a continuous variable into the regression. I think to run these regressions, we would additionally have to kind of change a bit our assumption about how I see or how I expect this true value lab score to affect people's behavior. So I think that the investors react only to very extreme movements in the true value lab score and to very extreme positions in the level effects of the true value lab score. And I think they do not react at all to true value lab scores in other domains. So I think it doesn't matter a lot to investors, or at least that's what I hypothesize, and what I also partially show by showing that people don't react to positive news, that in the upper domain people don't really react to any changes in the true value lab score. However, when there's extreme movements, so only in the very low part, I believe that people do react. And that's then also a reason for having this binary classification where only at the very low end people do react, and above that they don't. I think you make a very excellent point about these border effects. I have to say that I haven't...
Can I interrupt you briefly? Would you agree with me that what you're describing basically is a model where you would have the true value lab scores and the true value lab score squared, and then you would be interested in the point at which the conditional marginal effect would become negative? And your hypothesis is that it would be at extreme values?
Yes, so then I would estimate a nonlinear effect, that's true, but then the model would become more complex to estimate, right? If I have both those terms in my regression, then it would become more computationally intensive to estimate this, right?
Not exactly, because if you're throwing away 1/3 of your data, because that's equivalent to what you're doing now, what is more costly computationally? Getting rid of 1/3 of your data or adding one variable in your regression? In terms of degrees of freedom, I know which one is more costly.
I see your point. However, in our case, it would have taken... So running these regressions already took several days, and adding complexity would have made it very difficult to reiterate regressions, and I would say that this is my final answer, and I hope that gets close to what you were looking for.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you. The opposition will be continued by Professor van den Assen, Professor of Finance at the Free University in Amsterdam. Professor van den Assen was member of the assessment committee, and he's present online. Professor van den Assen, the floor is yours.
Good morning, dear candidate, dear Marten. First of all, let me congratulate you on delivering a very nice thesis. I really enjoyed reading it, not only because it's very clearly written, but also because I think your research questions are very important and highly topical. My first question is about chapter 3. In chapter 3, you find that a change in the beliefs of German investors about their German peers is driving changes in the amounts that they invest in sustainable funds. But my question then is, why exactly do you think German investors are influenced by the statements they see about other German investors? And the suggestion from your paper, also because of your abstract, is that it is because of social conformity or norms. So in the abstract, in the first sentence, you speak of examining the impact of perceived social norms on sustainable retail investment. I don't think you really go into that deep into the analysis. So my question is, can we reliably conclude that the statements about others' sustainable investment intentions, their impact beliefs and their return beliefs are truly having such an impact? Or may instead these statements convey information to your investors about what to do, let's say from the perspective of optimal portfolio management? So that people are thinking something like, you know, if crowds of others, like 70% of Germans, wow, that's a big crowd. If they act or think like that, then it might be smart for me to do the same. Or maybe, alternatively, they might even be trying to outsmart others because they learn from you what others are going to do. And that information makes it possible for them to be a little ahead of them and earn abnormal returns because the securities they buy will likely be in high demand at a future point in time. So my question is, what exactly do you think is the underlying explanation for the effect that you find? And then relatedly, how could you investigate this more deeply? And would it perhaps be an example be to do this by looking at the interaction with financial literacy as you do in chapter 2?
Yeah, highly esteemed opponent. Thank you very much, first of all, for the kind words, and then for this very interesting question. So we have three different frames, let's say, or three different ways in which we show this peer information. So we have first of all this impact peer information. Then we have the peer information just, well, we call it the social treatment, but just on others' intentions. And then we have the effect or the treatment on risk and return. And we find sort of the same effect for all three treatments, and that is sort of why I was leaning towards the interpretation that it is indeed some form of this social conformity that is driving the increased investments in the sustainable fund. So if investors only try to infer from other people, or if investors kind of get, or if investors' priors on the return or risks would be updated based on the information, then I would have expected a stronger effect among those in the return treatment, so those that receive the information that others believe that you can have a high return from the investments. We do in the experiment also elicit, or we ask people about the reasons why did you select, or why did you make the fund selection that you made. And there indeed those in the return treatment are more likely to claim that returns is what they're motivated by, which kind of gives an indication towards your point. However, I did not believe that these responses were particularly strong because, well, it's of course a self-report, and they have just seen the information that others think that sustainable investments can have a high return, and afterwards they're asked, why did you make the selection? So I thought this could bias them towards selecting the high return. So I did not include that table in the thesis. I think there's also potentially other factors that could influence our results, which is closely related to what I was just talking about. So what would come to mind immediately would be something like a demand effect. So investors infer what we want from them. So they think the right thing to do is to invest sustainably if we tell them that other people also invest sustainably. And this is something that is not, well, it's closely related to social conformity, I think. And I think it's difficult to strip these two together in studies on peer effects. However, I think we to some extent can work against that by giving all of the participants a basic explanation on sustainable finance. And so I would argue that at least in part, all participants are to some extent influenced by these demand effects. I hope this sufficiently answers your question.
Thank you for your answer.
The opposition will be continued by Dr. Belfi. Sorry. Dr. Belfi was member of the assessment committee of the thesis and a senior researcher at the Research Center for Education and the Labour Market at Maastricht University.
Thank you, dear candidates, dear Martin. Thanks for your wonderful presentation and your nice dissertation. And congratulations on your great work. It was really nice to read. And really insightful to me and provided me with some new insights. Today, my main questions pertain to the research you presented in chapter 2. And in that paper, you show that financial advisors charge sustainable investors with high financial literacy no premium, while sustainable investors with low or unknown financial literacy bear the burden of high fees. I thought that was an interesting finding. And while I read that, I was wondering, so to which extent is it not really a general principle that sellers adjust their prices to a buyer's when a buyer's understanding of a product increases? And how much of this is a particular issue with sustainable investment? So, for instance, when I buy a car, to which extent does the seller does not sell it to a higher price to me when he thinks I only have low understanding of cars? So that was my first question. Then my second question was, so actually, how do advisors identify individuals with high or low financial literacy? You only mentioned that briefly in the chapter, and I was wondering while reading it, what are the primary characteristics that distinguish these two types of individuals to an advisor? And then the third question was, what are your thoughts about the best resolution to this issue? So you mentioned actually two solutions in the end of your chapter. So the first is stronger governmental oversight that may regulate such practices. And lastly, you mentioned also that there might be a role for the education system to ensure that people are equipped with a certain basic knowledge of financial literacy, so that they're well equipped for this. So what of these two takes has your preference? And in case of the latter, what kind of fundamental knowledge in terms of financial literacy should be taught to students in school?
You may select at most 2 questions to answer.
At most
Okay.
2 questions.
Yeah.
Okay. Esteemed opponent, thank you very much for the kind words and for these 3 very interesting questions. So now I have to make a selection. So I will start with the second question. So what are the primary characteristics of investors with low financial literacy? So we actually used the big 3 financial literacy questions by Lozadi and Mitchell. So those include, importantly, and I think this, then I will move to the third question because this is related. This includes the ability of investors to calculate with percentages. So understanding how fees influence their portfolio wealth. And I think this is one very important aspect of these 3 questions that are asked. Because then the financial advisors can infer, okay, this person does not understand how a fee affects their wealth, so I can just charge a very high fee because he or she will never understand. That is also one of the reasons why financial products that are pretty much exactly the same, so S&P 500 index funds, for example, trade at a range of different prices because there are people who have difficulty in inferring or that have search costs and that have difficulty in comparing fees. And I think this relates then to the third question, so to question on what best to do against these issues. So there, indeed, I would have a preference for education and to increase understanding or knowledge about how to compare fees and how what makes up the cost of a financial product and how to best compare that between funds or financial products. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your answer. Then my question is, to which level of education should this information be taught? Do you think already in primary school, or is that more for secondary school or later on? And then also, what specific knowledge should then be taught? What do you think is like the basic knowledge you should encompass to engage in this?
Yeah.
Can you give a short answer?
Short answer. So I think percentage calculations are already in secondary school included. So I think there it would fit well to give the relation to financial products. Yes, and I forgot what the second part of the question was.
The second question was more like what kind of information would then serve as a basis?
Yeah, so what types of fees exist, what is a front-end load, what is an expense ratio, and how does that affect your portfolio wealth? Yep.
Thank you. The opposition will be continued by Dr. Kulbel. Dr. Kulbel was member of the assessment committee of the thesis. Dr. Kulbel is assistant professor of sustainable finance at the University of St. Gallen in Switzerland, and Dr. Kulbel is present online. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, and dear candidate, dear Martin, let me congratulate you on a fantastic thesis that was a pleasure to read, even to read it twice. I can only echo what has been said before. It is beautifully done, especially the experiments, I think, are set up with an amazing level of skill. So truly an achievement. My question pertains to external validity. Experiments are nice because you're in control of all the factors that you're interested in. But the Achilles heel is often whether they also represent what happens out there in the real world. So in chapter 2, you show that advisors seem to exploit if they know that the client has a preference for sustainability by charging a higher fee. And I agree that this is a very problematic finding. In essence, you're saying that the good intentions of clients end up lining the pockets of advisors rather than achieving something positive, at a greater level. You also ask policymakers if they think that is a problem, and they also agree with that. So basically, you set up the stage for some regulation to prevent this. But do you think this is already enough evidence to justify that? Because there are you cite evidence that the fees on products, ESG products, are higher, but these citations come from the Wall Street Journal and The Economist, and I recall these reports, and reading them, I was thinking, well, that's not really a study. Can we believe that? And there are, and I shared this with you, there's a report by ESMA that seems to find that the fees, and this is something different, of course, fund level fees, but they seem to be actually in line across regular products and ESG products. So how do you think, how much can we take from your experiments for how real advisors handle this situation?
Esteemed opponent, thank you very much for that question, which I think is very important. So let me start by saying that I agree that the Wall Street Journal and The Economist articles are not, we shouldn't take them as evidence. I included them as more of a evidence. People talk about this, or this is an issue that is discussed in the public, but we shouldn't put too much emphasis on their findings. The ESMA report that you are referring to, I think, I read it and I think it's quite thorough. So there's two other studies. So it's both working papers that I would refer to here. So one is from Baker and colleagues, who show that among US index funds, the expense ratios of those that claim to be sustainable is 5.9 basis points higher than those of conventional funds. And there's another one from Aragon and colleagues, who look at North American college funds and claim that those that have a responsible investment target pay on average 7.7 basis points higher fees. So if I would have to kind of speculate about these mixed findings, so we could, for example, think about maybe it is the the location. So maybe in the US there is there's a fee difference, so there is higher fees for sustainable investments, while that doesn't exist in Europe, for example. Could also be that it's only there for some financial products, so maybe it's there for index funds, but maybe not for other financial products. So what I think is important, and that also relates to the results from the dissertation, is that we don't only look at average fees, but try to maybe take a bit more nuanced look. So for example, it could be that specifically products that are marketed to less knowledgeable clients, so clients with low, or people with low financial literacy, for example, that there is a fee difference, but not for financial products that are marketed to more knowledgeable investors. I also thought about maybe there's a difference between active and passive investment, but I saw in the ESMA report they control for that. So controlling for active versus passive investment, they in Europe still don't find a fee difference. So I could only speculate about these mixed findings, and I think in future research, and as you say, external validity of experiments is always limited, and it's really important to look at the field as well. So in the future, I think it would be really interesting to see whether for some product categories there is a fee difference and maybe not for others. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Thank you. The opposition will be continued by Professor Werner. Professor Werner is Professor of Policy, Design and Behavioral Economics at Maastricht University.
Okay. Thank you very much. So, dear candidate, dear Marten, so let me follow the previous speakers and congratulate to a very interesting and very well-written thesis. So it was a pleasure to read it. Your thesis is based on thorough empirical analysis and also very carefully designed experiments, and it really addresses a very interesting and also timely topic with a focus on sustainable investments. My question relates to Chapter 3. You have shown that the peer information interventions are effective in, let's say, changing the portfolio choice of the bank clients in your experiments. But at the same time, you see that there's no longer-term effect in the sense that the true portfolio choice of these bank clients do not change significantly afterwards. And of course, as you also discuss in your thesis, there's, let's say, mixed evidence on the effects of these peer information intervention or social norm interventions. And I was wondering, and also your conclusion is, okay, perhaps it's difficult to change behavior. That's also what you described in your presentation. So my question is, okay, your experiment shows that there's some kind of effect, so we can actually shift behavior, but it's maybe more difficult to affect behavior in the medium, from a medium-term perspective. So would you have some ideas? So that is my question. So how could we design peer information interventions, social norm interventions? How should they look like, and how should we implement them actually to achieve a more longer-term effect on behavior?
Highly esteemed opponent, first of all, thanks a lot for the kind words, and then for this question, which I think is really important. So what I also outline a bit in the thesis is that based on these results, that I believe that if we want to change behavior with these peer information or these social norm interventions, then we should deliver them during the buying decision, so at the time of the buying decision. And then afterwards, it will probably have less of an effect. So there is also the related study by Hunt Alcott, who sent out letters to households comparing their energy consumption to their neighbors, and this increased overall energy conservation levels. And he also found that this effect tapers off, and showed that it is important to resend these letters every so and so many weeks. And then similarly, so based on these results, it would probably make sense for these interventions to repeat the information, for example, every time there is a buying decision. So a social norm intervention could then, for example, instruct these financial advisors to anytime anybody makes a buying decision to share this peer information. This would be one example. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The opposition will be continued by Dr. Eiling. Dr. Eiling is Associate Professor in Finance of the Universiteit van Amsterdam.
Thank you. Dear candidate, dear Marten, let me also start by congratulating you on a very interesting dissertation. Sustainable investing is a key topic, much discussion around it. Surge in ESG investing, yet there's much we don't know. So your kind of research is very valuable. My question is a more general one. So throughout the dissertation, sort of argued that a policy goal is to increase sustainable investments. And sort of the studies that you document sort of aim to contribute to achieving that goal. And so I was wondering, can you elaborate a bit on that policy goal, given that, at least at this point in time, the evidence that sustainable investing has impact is still lacking, as you also acknowledged in your opening talk. So there's little evidence at this point that a green portfolio leads to a greener world. And for example, in chapter 3, you suggest that giving information about peers' views on sustainable investing might help individuals invest more in a more sustainable way. But my question is this desirable? Given that these individuals are small investors, very likely their impact will be very small. So is this even desirable based on what we know right now? Look forward to your answer.
Esteemed opponent, thank you very much for your kind words and for this very important question. It is a policy goal in the sense that it was announced as a policy goal by the European Commission to increase flows towards sustainable investments. However, I think that this is a point that you implied and with which I would fully agree, that it does not make sense to increase flows into investments that don't have an impact. And this relates a bit to one of the propositions from my dissertation and what I showed in the takeaway slides, that I think that by only using financial advice, for example, it's not possible to perfectly align investor preferences with the investment decisions. Because if financial advisors redirect these investors towards sustainable products that exist, it could be that they are directing them towards products that have no impact, and that's of course not in line with their preferences. And I think it is absolutely necessary to, and I think the current regulation that exists until now is not perfectly doing it, to have it be the case that investment products that are labeled sustainable actually should have a measurable impact. So as you say, should lead to a greener world. And then, if this is a given, then it is, I think, also helpful to think about how to redirect funds. So it is a policy goal to redirect investments towards these sustainable investments, as proposed, for example, by the European Commission. But it should be a policy goal to do this, and at the same time to also make sure that the money that flows to sustainable investments flows towards impact.
Could I ask a short follow-up question? So if that's the goal, so what would be the channel through which these sustainable investments might achieve impact, in your view?
Excuse me, could you repeat?
So how can these sustainable investments achieve impact? What's the economic mechanism there?
So we could, for example, I talked about these engagement strategies, for example, right? So it could be that shareholders bundle together their shareholder power to vote on shareholder proposals to improve the business, the sustainability of business activities. For example, another way could be impact investing, so investing towards projects that, if they would have more financing, could create a sustainable impact, but the bottleneck is a lack of financing, and if money could flow into that direction, then I think there could be a real impact.
All right, so it sounds like those are different types of investments than sort of the sustainable funds that you use in your experiments.
Yes, it's different than, for example, in chapter 2, where financial advisors tend to screen out or not invest in those that have the low scores and only invest in those that have a high scores, which is more towards the divestment strategy that I mentioned. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have time for a second round, and then we start with Professor van den Assen. Professor van den Assen, do you have questions for a second round?
Yes, I have. I would like to talk a bit more about chapter 2, where you find that financial advisors charge these additional fees to sustainable investors. And you write that you interpret the premium as price discrimination that financial advisors use to extract additional profits from client sustainable investment preferences. And you also find in your second experiment that advisors primarily charge sustainable investment clients with low or unknown financial literacy premium. And the premium disappears when their financial literacy is known to be high. So my question is, if the premium disappears when a sustainable client's financial literacy is high, how can you then still conclude that it is price discrimination targeting sustainable investors? Aren't you simply finding that advisors are more generally exploiting naive and uneducated investors? And the suggestion is now they're exploiting their preferences from your work, but then that would not be the case, right? That's the question.
Yeah, highly esteemed opponent. Yeah, thanks a lot. So, first of all, let's start with the first experiment. There we have sustainable investors and conventional investors with no information on financial literacy. So the advisors would have to kind of infer the financial literacy. And there we also find a higher fee for the sustainable investors. So why I say that it is price discrimination is that I kind of the service that is given by the financial advisor is their time and their effort, because in these experiments they don't need a lot of industry knowledge, so they just put in their time, and that's the service that they provide. And this is the same for both client groups. And if we have the exact same service, but they charge different fees to different client groups, then this is in line with the notion of price discrimination. So that's the wording that I use. And then in the second experiment, indeed, we additionally show the information on low financial literacy. So when we only look at the fees charged by literacy, we see that the advisors charge significantly more to less literate clients than to the more literate clients. So there also seems to be some form of price discrimination against those who have little finance knowledge compared to those who have a lot of finance knowledge. In addition, we then have the sustainability that comes in, and there we find that the highest fee is charged to those with low literacy and sustainability preferences, and the lowest fee is charged to those with high literacy and conventional investment preferences. So it seems a bit that this price discrimination happens on two dimensions. So the client segment that is paying the highest fee is sustainable investors with low with low finance knowledge. So I would still say that our results are in line with the notion of price discrimination, where the customer segment that pays the high fee is the segment of low finance knowledge and sustainable investments. Does that answer your question?
Yes, definitely new information that I had not considered. But I think part of your defense here is that you say that in the first experiment we also observed this difference, where there's no financial literacy information provided to the advisors. But I think I read, I'm not 100% sure, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I read in your thesis also that there's a strong correlation between financial literacy and sustainable investment preferences, right? So if that's general knowledge, then you don't need to provide that information, but your advisors are already assuming that the clients for the sustainable funds actually are less financially literate. So via the backdoor, then you would still have this effect, right?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. So among the general population, I think this is the case. So there's a correlation between low finance knowledge and sustainable investment preferences. In our experiment, that is not the case, because we pick out clients so that we have an even number of people with low finance knowledge and sustainable investments, low finance knowledge and conventional investments, and so on. So in all of these boxes, we have the same number of investors. However,
also in experiment 1.
No, that's not the case in experiment 1. No, so yeah, you're right. So for experiment 1, indeed, the advisors would have to infer kind of the finance knowledge of their clients, and that could be the case. So it's very difficult for us to say this ex post. It would have been interesting to maybe have a sort of a prediction that is given from the financial advisors. They see different clients, and then they have to predict what do you think is the finance knowledge of this client, and then you could, of course, incentivize this. So now that I say it, I think this would be interesting for future research. Unfortunately, I cannot go back and do this for the dissertation. But indeed, this could be the case. And when you look at the graph that I showed in the presentation, it looks a bit as if the financial advisors charge the sustainable clients with unknown financial literacy the same fee as the average fee with low finance knowledge. So they infer low knowledge, finance knowledge from financial literacy, as you suspected, and the fee charged to conventional investors looks a bit like the average fee charged to everybody with high finance knowledge. I think this is a very interesting point. Unfortunately, for experiment 1, I cannot give you more information on this.
Thanks for your answer.
Thank you. Just in time, I think. Now, I must say you can finish your answer, but there's no question anymore, so we can stop now. Marten Laudi, the time appointed for defending your thesis has passed. The degree committee will now withdraw to discuss the quality of your thesis and your defense. I request that you and your company await the results of our deliberations and our return in this room.
The PhD defense has now ended. The degree committee will debate the candidate's performance behind closed doors. This process usually takes about 10 minutes.
Questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. I know what's on the line. I know you know that I can't read your mind. Years can't fly by now. Waste all your time, 'cause I'll go the extra mile. to the south side. 7 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goals only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. On the dash, got my laces tied. Long road, I don't waste no time. Break rules because fate decides. With the team and we chase the light. I make a move, fall down, shake it off. I hate to lose, bad brands, break it off. No room for negativity, praise and love. Prepare for deep part cause we're taking off. Take the mileage, traveling so far from home. Gathering knowledge, other connections. I put the time in to get everything I ever hoped for. It's a challenge and we all in. It's a better future than we go. Even though these nights seem long, I know that I am never on my own. Know you won the battle once you grow. South side, 7 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goals only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. Long road to the south side, 7 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goals only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got.
Can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. Cause I'll go the extra mile.
Yeah.
Zet die plus 2 zo in. Revealed preference, zal ik maar zeggen. Ja. Marten Laudi. The degree committee here present has assessed the quality of your thesis and your defense. In view of its positive verdict and taking into account your previous qualifications, the degree committee has decided to grant you the degree of doctor. Professor Bauer is authorized to confer upon you this academic distinction in accordance with Dutch university custom. I invite your supervisor to now take the floor, and thereafter Professor Smeets will give you the laudatio.
Do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of scientific integrity at all times, to be careful and honest, transparent, independent and responsible?
Yes, I promise.
Okay. By the authority vested in us by law and in conformity with the decision of the committee here present, I hereby confer upon you, Marten Laudi, the degree of doctor and grant you all rights attached by custom and law. As evidence of this, I now present you with the degree certificate signed by the rector, the secretary, and the other members of this committee, and affixed with the official seal of the university. This is the photo moment.
We will have more moments after the laudatio.
So, Marten, also ich möchte zuerst dir und auch deiner Familie gratulieren mit dieser schönen Leistung. It's really a big accomplishment, and not just this PhD defense, but Marten's whole academic career has taken off very quickly. And we got to know each other when Marten was a research assistant. And yeah, I thought this guy I should have, because not only did he do a very good job with his work, you know, always delivering stuff on time, really going deep and figuring it out, but also, yeah, I guess everybody here who knows Marten knows he's just a very pleasant guy. And that's at least equally important if you start an adventure for 4 years. And it also proved like that. And let me just highlight a couple of things that Marten has done. And just recently, he won the best dissertation award, so not just for one paper, but actually for the whole dissertation from the FUR PRI. And so together with Janine, his wife, traveled to Paris and got a very nice prize there for his dissertation. And it just doesn't stop there. And so Marten also had a chance to present at the Western Finance Association. So that's a conference in finance with an acceptance rate of 7%. And so 93% of all the papers that are submitted are rejected. But Marten's paper was selected to present there among the top people from the University of Chicago, Harvard, Yale. They were all there. And then Marten Laudi. So, and then, just like today, where he really stands there with a nice, relaxed vibe, answering the questions. Yeah, it was the same in San Francisco, where we traveled for the WFA. And that was the other nice thing. We traveled there together, and not only could I witness how well Marten presented his paper, but we actually decided to travel a little bit after the conference. And we traveled together to Yosemite National Park. And it also shows that Marten is not just a good researcher, but for me, also really a close friend. And yeah, when you look at Marten, you of course, when you look at his size, he needs to have, of course, a car that fits that size. So he decided to rent the biggest Jeep possible at Hertz. And yeah, a dissertation about sustainability. So of course, we had to go to the gas station every 10 miles. And but then Marten felt a little bit guilty, of course, when you study his dirty money paper. Yeah, if you drive in such a big Jeep, yeah, you think like, maybe it's not so good for the planet. So Marten started to consume a lot. And for example, one thing that he consumed was when we were in Garlic City. So on the way back from the Yosemite Park, we drove back to San Francisco for our flight the next day. But then our host in the bed and breakfast recommended us to pass Garlic City, because the only place in the whole world when you can try garlic ice cream. Yeah, you see already, when I think back about that, my head falls off. But that was also with Marten. So I actually made the secret video of Marten trying out the garlic ice cream, and still now when I'm in a bad mood, I just play the video, I look how Marten is consuming the garlic ice cream, and it makes my day. So that shows how much fun we had during that trip, and that is just something that I hope that we can keep cherishing in the future. But there is more. There's even more than this, because Marten also spent a period abroad at Harvard University. So again, being among all the top scholars, and Marten presented his work there in the research group of Professor Michael Norton. And also I heard back there that people were really impressed with Marten. So I would say it's an impressive career. And now he's found a very nice job at the University of Bremen, also being close to the family. And when I see how much of a family guy Marten is, yeah, that must be not only special for him, but also for the family. And then, to complete the whole circle, where does Marten and Janine decide to get married? In the hometown of Rob Bauer and me. So I would say that really completes it, and I had the pleasure to be part of the wonderful wedding with a lot of great people around who have been dancing on the dance floor. And what I could really witness is how proud Janine was to be the wife of Marten, but also how proud Marten was to have Janine. So that was really nice to observe that whole day, and also really shows a little bit of the characteristic of Marten. I would say Marten has a little bit of the characteristic of a puppy. And so a puppy is always very curious, it's always very joyful, very kind, very friendly. And over his career, what I have recommended Marten several times is, like, sometimes you have to be a little bit of a pit bull. So, because if you look at the academic arena, people can be tough sometimes, right? There can be some political fights going on. So once in a while, you need to be a pit bull. So that would be my one recommendation for Marten. But I would say, while you're developing your pit bull that you sometimes need, definitely keep your kindness, your curiosity, and above all, don't forget to stay a nice puppy. Congratulations, Marten.
Dear Dr. Laudi, also on behalf of Maastricht University and the School of Business and Economics of Maastricht University, I congratulate you with the degree that you have acquired. And herewith I close the session. For the audience, please, you can go to the Refter where we have the reception. The Bido will tell you where to go. We stay in this room because we have a photo moment together with the Paraninfe and the supervisors and the committee and the people who are online. Thank you.
Recording stopped.